The Galactic Council sat in silent contemplation, their many eyes watching the holographic projection in the center of the chamber. It displayed Earth, rotating slowly in space, a small blue dot amidst the stars. Despite their vast technological superiority and centuries of dominance, the Council felt a growing unease. Humanity was advancing far too quickly, and their influence stretched across the outer sectors of the galaxy. Colonies had sprung up on distant worlds, their power seemingly unchecked. Treaties had been signed, yes, but peace with humanity was fragile, too fragile. Something must be done, one of the counselors finally said, his voice a low hiss that echoed through the chamber. They threaten the balance. Their colonies grow. Their technology advances. They will not stop. Another counselor, her voice cold and mechanical, nodded. The time for diplomacy has passed. We must act before they challenge our authority. Murmurs of agreement spread through the chamber. The humans were different from any species they had encountered before. They were resilient, adaptable, and disturbingly aggressive when threatened. Their military, though smaller, had already proven itself formidable in several border skirmishes. The Council knew that if they waited any longer, humanity could become a threat that even their combined forces would struggle to contain. The solution was clear. The Galactic Council had long kept a secret weapon in reserve, one too dangerous to deploy unless the situation demanded it. Now, it seemed, the time had come to unleash that weapon. They will not survive. A third voice, deep and rumbling, declared. Deploy the Void Reapers. A silence fell over the chamber. Even the most hardened counselors felt a chill at the mention of the Void Reapers. These beings were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were cold-blooded killers, engineered to be emotionless, efficient, and utterly lethal. Bred in secret labs, the Reapers had no concept of mercy or hesitation. They existed only to kill. The decision was made. The Void Reapers would be sent to wipe out the human colonies on the outer rim. The Council believed that once humanity saw the devastation, they would retreat, abandoning their expansionist ambitions in fear. The Council underestimated one crucial thing: humanity's refusal to bow down. Across the galaxy, on the distant human colony of Valera Prime, the skies darkened as the Void Reapers descended. They arrived without warning, their ships cutting through the atmosphere like blades. The people of Valera had only moments to realize what was happening before the attack began. The Reapers struck with precision, their movements swift and coordinated, their weapons designed to kill with brutal efficiency. Valera's defenses were not prepared for an enemy like this. The colony had faced pirates, rogue factions, and the occasional alien raid, but nothing like the Void Reapers. Entire squads of human soldiers were cut down within minutes, their weapons useless against the Reapers' advanced armor and relentless assault. The Reapers showed no mercy, moving from settlement to settlement, leaving nothing but death in their wake. Civilians tried to flee, but there was no escape. The Reapers' ships circled overhead, their drones ensuring that no one left the planet alive. In the colony's capital, General Markov watched the carnage unfold on the monitors. His face was grim, but his eyes burned with determination. He had seen war before, had fought in battles most men would not have survived, but this was different. The enemy was unlike anything he had ever encountered. We can't hold them off, one of his officers said, his voice shaking. They're too fast, too coordinated. It's like they know our every move before we make it. Markov nodded slowly. That's because they do, he replied. They're not like us. They don't think like us. They don't feel like us. They're machines, in everything but name. The officer looked at him, fear in his eyes. Then how do we stop them? Markov didn't answer right away. He had known from the moment the first Reaper's ship touched down that their regular forces wouldn't be enough. This enemy required something more, something the world had not yet seen. He turned to another officer. Contact Earth, he ordered. It's time to deploy the super soldiers. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. The super soldiers were humanity's last resort, a program shrouded in secrecy, whispered about in military circles but rarely discussed openly. They were not soldiers in the traditional sense. They were enhanced, engineered to be stronger, faster, and smarter than any human before them. They were the product of decades of research, designed to be the perfect warriors for a future war no one had wanted to acknowledge. "Are we sure we want to do this?" one of the officers asked quietly. "Once we unleash them, there's no going back." Markov's gaze was steady. "We don't have a choice. If we don't, we're all dead." The message was sent. Across the galaxy, the super soldiers were mobilized. They had been waiting for this moment, prepared for years for a battle only they could fight. The call went out, and Earth's finest warriors answered. The super soldiers had been created for precisely this moment, a response to threats so severe that normal human forces could not stand a chance. These soldiers were not only physically superior but enhanced in every way that mattered. Their bodies were engineered with advanced genetics, providing them with the strength and speed of 10 men. Their minds were sharpened through years of intensive training, honing instincts that no ordinary soldier could possess. Most importantly, they were built to fight against any adversary, no matter how brutal or unforgiving. As they prepared for deployment, each soldier suited up in armor that was as much a part of them as their own skin. Their equipment was state-of-the-art, adaptive, responsive, and designed to give them every possible advantage. They didn't speak much as they readied themselves. These soldiers knew their duty, and words were unnecessary. Their faces were calm, their movements efficient. They had trained for this, and no hesitation clouded their minds. Back on Valera Prime, the situation had worsened. The human colony was on the verge of collapse. The Void Reapers had methodically wiped out nearly all resistance. Buildings lay in ruins, and the few remaining human forces struggled to regroup. General Markov knew that reinforcements would arrive soon, but every minute felt like an eternity, as his people continued to fall. Suddenly, the ground rumbled as the first transport ships entered the atmosphere. The super soldiers had arrived. Without fanfare or ceremony, they deployed directly into the heart of the battle. Unlike standard infantry, these soldiers did not scatter or hesitate. They moved with perfect coordination, each one aware of the other's position and role, operating like a seamless machine. The Void Reapers were relentless, but they had never faced anything like the super soldiers before. As the two forces collided, the battlefield shifted dramatically. The Reapers, who had previously dominated every engagement with their brutal efficiency, suddenly found themselves facing enemies who could match their speed and strength. The super soldiers not only stood their ground but began pushing back. Their superior reflexes allowed them to counter the Reapers' attacks with ease, while their enhanced intelligence meant they could anticipate the enemy's next move. One of the key advantages of the super soldiers was their ability to adapt. The Reapers operated on a hive mind system, their movements predictable once a pattern was established. The super soldiers quickly identified this weakness. They used guerrilla tactics, striking fast and retreating just as swiftly, keeping the Reapers off balance. Every time the Reapers attempted to regroup, the super soldiers disrupted their efforts with perfectly timed strikes. General Markov observed the battle from the command center, watching in awe as his elite forces turned the tide. The Reapers, once unstoppable, were now on the defensive. Markov had always known the super soldiers were formidable, but seeing them in action was something else entirely. They fought with a level of precision and ferocity that no human could match. It was as if they could see every move the enemy was about to make, countering it before it even began. But it wasn't just brute strength and speed that made the super soldiers effective. Their enhanced cognitive abilities allowed them to process vast amounts of information in real time, calculating probabilities, analyzing enemy movements, and adjusting their tactics accordingly. They weren't just soldiers. They were living weapons, designed for a war like this. Still, the Reapers were not to be underestimated. They were cold-blooded killers, and their lack of emotion made them dangerous in a way few enemies could be. They didn't retreat, didn't panic, and didn't make mistakes out of fear or desperation. They were relentless, and their advanced weaponry continued to tear through human defenses wherever the super soldiers were not. Yet for every blow the Reapers landed, the super soldiers responded tenfold. They dismantled the Reapers' formations, isolating individual units and destroying them with brutal efficiency. The Reaper's hive mind, which had once seemed an insurmountable advantage, became a liability as the super soldiers exploited its rigidity. The humans fought like individuals but coordinated like machines, the perfect blend of instinct and intelligence. The Reaper's first line began to falter. The super soldiers pressed their advantage, driving deeper into enemy territory, eliminating key Reaper units with surgical precision. In one particularly fierce engagement, a squad of super soldiers managed to breach the Reaper's central command unit. They had identified it as the key to disrupting the enemy's coordination. With a single concentrated strike, they brought down the command unit, and the Reaper's forces across the battlefield suddenly began to falter, their hive-mind connection severed. General Markov clenched his fists as he watched the screen. The plan was working. The Reapers were unraveling, their once unbreakable formation collapsing under the weight of human strategy and strength. For the first time since the invasion began, there was a glimmer of hope. But the super soldiers knew better than to celebrate too early. They maintained their focus, continuing to press the advantage. Even as the Reapers fell back, the super soldiers anticipated their next move, cutting them off before they could regroup. Every time the Reapers tried to shift tactics, the super soldiers were one step ahead. By the end of the day, the battlefield was a different place. The once invincible Void Reapers were in retreat, their forces decimated by the relentless assault of the super soldiers. Valera Prime, though scarred by the conflict, still stood. The colony had been saved, but the cost had been high. The super soldiers regrouped, standing amidst the wreckage. They had won the battle, but they knew the war was far from over. The Galactic Council would not let this defeat go unanswered, and humanity's enemies were still out there, watching, waiting. The battlefield was eerily quiet for a moment, as if the universe itself held its breath. The super soldiers stood motionless, scanning the wreckage around them. Their victory over the first wave of Void Reapers had been decisive, but everyone knew this was far from the end. The Reapers were relentless, and even with their hive-mind coordination disrupted, they wouldn't stop until every human on Valera Prime was dead. The super soldiers knew they needed to move fast before the enemy could regroup. Without warning, the ground trembled, and in the distance, the unmistakable sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the ruined landscape. The Reapers were returning, but this time, they were bringing reinforcements. Massive, hulking forms appeared on the horizon, Reaper war machines, towering over the battlefield. These behemoths were the Galactic Council's ultimate siege weapons, designed to crush entire cities underfoot. Armed with heavy artillery and protected by impenetrable armor, the war machines represented a new level of destruction. The super soldiers wasted no time. They quickly regrouped, dividing into smaller squads to maximize their tactical advantage. Unlike conventional forces, they didn't panic or hesitate. Their enhanced minds processed the situation instantly, calculating the best angles of attack. They knew that a frontal assault against the war machines would be suicide, so they employed guerrilla tactics once again, using their surroundings to their advantage. The war machines opened fire, sending shockwaves through the ground as their cannons tore through the remnants of the colony. Entire buildings crumbled under the barrage, and the few remaining human defenders were forced to retreat further into the city's ruins. But the super soldiers pressed forward undeterred. Using the wreckage as cover, they darted between the rubble, moving too fast for the war machines to track. One squad managed to get close to the nearest war machine, using advanced climbing gear to scale its massive legs. Once they reached a critical point near the joints, they planted high-yield explosives, timing the detonation perfectly. The explosion ripped through the war machine's leg, sending the giant toppling to the ground with a deafening crash. Before the Reapers could react, the super soldiers had already moved on, targeting the next war machine with the same deadly precision. The battle raged on, and the Reapers' forces continued to diminish. With each war machine they destroyed, the super soldiers gained more ground. Their strategy was simple but effective: disrupt the enemy's cohesion, exploit their weaknesses, and strike with overwhelming force. Even the Reapers' relentless nature couldn't save them from the calculated brutality of the human soldiers. But the Reapers weren't the only ones suffering losses. Despite their enhancements, the super soldiers were not invincible. Several of them had fallen during the intense fighting, their bodies torn apart by the Reapers' advanced weaponry. For all their superiority, they were still human, and the cost of victory weighed heavily on their minds. General Markov, watching the battle unfold from the command center, knew the super soldiers were giving everything they had. Yet he also knew that this was only the beginning. The Reapers would keep coming, and eventually even the super soldiers would be overwhelmed. The Galactic Council had endless resources, and Valera Prime was just one battle in a much larger war. As the last of the war machines fell, the remaining Reaper forces began to retreat. The super soldiers pursued them relentlessly, cutting down any who tried to escape. But even in victory, there was no celebration. The soldiers regrouped, their faces grim, knowing that the fight was far from over. As they prepared for the next wave, something strange began to happen. The Reaper forces, once cold and emotionless, started to behave erratically. Their movements became disjointed, their precision faltering. At first, it seemed like a minor malfunction in their hive-mind coordination, a result of the earlier disruption. But as the minutes passed, it became clear that something far more significant was happening. The Reapers were breaking down. General Markov noticed it too. The enemy, once so efficient and terrifying, was now stumbling through the battlefield like lost children. Their once perfect coordination was gone, replaced by chaos and confusion. The super soldiers, ever watchful, took full advantage of the situation, wiping out the remaining Reapers with ease. But there was something else. As the last of the Reapers fell, a realization dawned on the super soldiers. They hadn't just disrupted the Reapers' hive mind, they had somehow taken control of it. The enhanced minds of the super soldiers, sharpened by years of genetic engineering and intense training, had found a way to tap into the Reapers' neural network. It was an unintended consequence of their enhancements, a byproduct of the way their brains processed information. Without even realizing it, the super soldiers had hacked into the Reapers' hive mind, disrupting their communication and rendering them useless in combat. What had begun as a desperate fight for survival had turned into a total rout, thanks to the sheer willpower and mental superiority of humanity's finest warriors. The realization hit hard. The super soldiers had always been designed to be the ultimate weapon, but no one had anticipated that they would develop this kind of ability. They had not only defeated the Reapers, they had broken them from the inside out. As the last Reaper fell, the battlefield grew quiet once again. The super soldiers stood amidst the wreckage, their faces unreadable. They had won, but at what cost? The power they had just unleashed was far greater than anyone had expected. They had always been humanity's greatest weapon, but now they were something more, something potentially uncontrollable. General Markov stared at the screen, his mind racing. The Galactic Council had no idea what they were up against. The super soldiers had not only proven their physical superiority but had also shown that their mental capabilities were beyond anything the aliens could comprehend. But this new power came with its own set of dangers. If the super soldiers could control the Reapers, what else could they control? For now, the threat had been neutralized. Valera Prime was safe, and humanity had won a decisive victory. But as the super soldiers regrouped, preparing for their next mission, the question lingered in the air: had humanity unleashed a force even they couldn't fully control? Markov knew that the war was far from over, and the true test of the super soldiers had only just begun. The super soldiers regrouped, standing amidst the shattered remnants of the enemy forces. Their victory was undeniable, but the unease that settled over the survivors was palpable. Each soldier understood the significance of what had just transpired, even if they didn't voice it aloud. Their new ability, this unforeseen evolution of their enhancements, was something they hadn't anticipated. They had defeated the Reapers, not just through combat, but by infiltrating their very minds. The question now wasn't how they won, but what this victory meant for the future. General Markov paced the command center, his mind racing through the implications. The Galactic Council wouldn't take this defeat lightly. They had underestimated humanity's resilience, but worse, they had miscalculated the human capacity for adaptation. Markov knew that when word of this battle reached the Council, the response would be swift and unforgiving. They had never faced an enemy capable of fighting them on so many levels, physically, tactically, and now mentally. And the super soldiers had just proven they were more than warriors. They were a force the galaxy had never seen before. As communication lines re-established themselves, Markov's headquarters received incoming transmissions from Earth's military high command. The victory was reported, but instead of celebration, the tone was cautious. The footage of the battle was being analyzed in real time, and already questions were being asked about the sudden collapse of the Reaper forces. High-ranking officials wanted answers. What had caused the Reapers to malfunction? How had the super soldiers turned the tide so dramatically? Markov didn't have all the answers yet, but he knew that this battle would change everything. He spoke with his superiors, explaining what they had witnessed on the ground. The super soldiers, through their enhanced cognitive abilities, had somehow linked into the Reaper's hive mind. The exact mechanism was still unclear, but the results were undeniable. The soldiers had turned the Reaper's greatest strength, collective coordination, into their greatest weakness. As the conversation unfolded, Markov couldn't help but feel a growing sense of unease. Earth's leaders were excited by this development. The potential to disrupt alien hive mind systems opened new doors in warfare. They saw this as an opportunity, a way to gain the upper hand in a conflict that had seemed impossible to win through brute force alone. But Markov knew better than to view this as a simple victory. The Reapers had been defeated, yes, but what had been unleashed could not be easily contained. While the discussions raged on back on Earth, the super soldiers remained focused on the aftermath. They had done what they were designed to do, but they too felt the weight of what had occurred. These were not men and women who craved power or domination. They were soldiers, trained to protect humanity at all costs. And yet, standing on the battlefield, surrounded by the wreckage of an alien force they had mentally dismantled, they couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted inside them. Back at headquarters, a new transmission interrupted Markov's briefing. It was a message from the Galactic Council. The humans had expected a response, but not this quickly. The Council's tone was cold, almost dispassionate, but there was an unmistakable edge of fear in their words. They acknowledged the defeat of their Void Reapers and demanded an immediate ceasefire for negotiations. Markov's eyes narrowed. The Galactic Council, who had once viewed humanity as a minor inconvenience, now saw them as a legitimate threat. The use of the Void Reapers had been their boldest move yet, a show of force meant to intimidate and break the humans' will. Instead, the Council was now seeking talks. They wanted to know more about the super soldiers. They wanted to understand how the seemingly primitive species had turned their most advanced technology against them. But Markov wasn't naive. He knew these negotiations were just another strategy, a way for the Council to buy time, gather intelligence, and strike again when the opportunity presented itself. There would be no lasting peace, only a brief lull before the next wave of conflict. The Council couldn't afford to let humanity rise any further. As he listened to the message, Markov felt a chill run down his spine. Earth's leaders were already leaning toward accepting the ceasefire, eager to exploit the diplomatic leverage this victory had given them. But Markov knew the truth. The real danger wasn't the Council's next move. It was the unknown potential of the super soldiers. What would happen when these soldiers returned to Earth? How would their new abilities be controlled, if they could even be controlled at all? The very thing that had saved humanity today could easily become its greatest threat tomorrow. The super soldiers had unlocked something within themselves that went beyond their physical enhancements. They had bridged a mental gap no one thought was possible. And now, that power could not be unlearned. As the negotiations moved forward, Markov received a final report from his ground forces. The last of the Reapers had been neutralized, and Valera Prime was secure. But the damage had been done. The colony was in ruins, and the survivors would need months, if not years, to rebuild. This victory, while significant, had come at a steep cost. Markov ordered his team to begin preparations for the next phase. The super soldiers were to be extracted and debriefed immediately. Every detail of the battle would be dissected, every action analyzed. The goal now wasn't just to understand how they had won, but to understand the full extent of the super soldiers' new capabilities. Earth's leadership wanted to know if this mental superiority could be weaponized in future conflicts. But for Markov, the question wasn't whether they could harness this power, it was whether they should. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that humanity had crossed the line today. They had proven their strength, their resilience, and their tactical brilliance. But in doing so, they had also unleashed something unpredictable, something that could spiral out of control if they weren't careful. As the super soldiers prepared to depart, they too felt the weight of what was to come. Their victory had secured humanity's place in the galaxy, but at what cost? They had fought for survival, but in the process, they had become something more than soldiers. The power they now wielded was immense, and its potential was terrifying. Markov watched as the ships carrying the super soldiers lifted off, heading back toward Earth. The battle for Valera Prime was over, but a new battle, one for the future of humanity, was just beginning. The Galactic Council may have retreated for now, but Markov knew that this was far from the last time they would face off. And when they did, the real question would be whether humanity could control the very force that had saved them today. The war wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun.